everyone. My name is Verinia Michalun. I work for the OECD. I lead the work on governance and strategic planning at the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. We specialize in very long names. And I'm really pleased to be here and to see everyone. And I'd like to thank our hosts from North Rhine-Westphalia and also Münster for the opportunity to be here and hear more about the energy and climate transition. So I will be moderating our meeting, and I'd like to just move straight into this and pass the floor to Peter Berkowitz, who is online. He's the director of the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy, DG Regio, at the European Commission. Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And thank you for promoting me as well. I'm not a Director General, I'm just a director. But you can hear me. I can see that you're laughing. Very, very good. Oh, look, it's a pleasure to be online with you. I'm sorry I couldn't have been with you physically. In fact, this is quite a long journey that I think we started quite a few years ago together with the colleagues of the OECD in order to try and better understand issues of industrial transition. At that time, the energy transition, I think, was a bit of a kind of a peripheral issue. But the fact that we're organizing this today just shows you that this really now is at the center of issues of industrial transition. So just to say, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the European Commission. And I see Nadim as well as online. And really delighted to bring together so many different partners across the Atlantic, from the EU, from the Canada, and from the US. And this is the second of the seminars which we've been organizing, which is trying really to bring together regions, local authorities, and different actors to better understand how we can bring a transatlantic perspective to regional development policy for industrial transition. Now, we're looking today at the issue of what drives the energy transition in regions. And you only have to open a newspaper or well, probably your smartphone to just to realize how much energy is really at the heart of a broad range of issues and indeed of our socioeconomic system. But of course, we know that our energy systems are not sustainable, in particular because we have limited stocks of fossil fuels. We know about the challenges of global warming, the impact on health of air pollution, and what we have seen in the last few weeks, again, is the impact of geopolitical tensions. And here, particularly in Europe, we are very aware of acute energy dependencies, and major geopolitical shocks can have a very, very big impact well beyond the energy sector. Now, in Europe, this is a particularly important objective. I would say one of the most important policy objectives for the European Union. And we have committed in Europe to decarbonise our economy and reach climate neutrality by 2050 in line with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And this is a binding commitment in the EU, and it means a lot of big changes. We need to reduce our energy consumption, improve energy efficiency, and replace carbon-based energy by renewables. But because, as I said, this is so embedded in our socioeconomic system, we need to have a multi-dimensional approach, kind of whole of system approach. And there are a whole lot of different dynamics where there are important issues that are not simple to solve, whether we're talking about renewable energies and the new challenges that the transition here brings. For example, this allows us to have more decentralized production, but at the same time, it creates issues of continuity and stability. There is also a question of a race for the critical raw materials that are needed to develop the technologies that we need to achieve this transition. There is the question of how we achieve this transition while maintaining our economy's competitiveness. And of course, there is the impact on employment. And the problem here is that the costs and benefits in terms of employment are not always localized in the same place. And workers will need to have skills. All of these things mean that we need to have appropriate policy instruments. And all of these things mean that we need to have policies which operate at different levels because it's impossible to have a kind of a centralized approach to resolving these problems. And therefore, we need to engage the knowledge that we have at regional and local level. Now, in the EU, we have a number of different policy instruments. We have EU cohesion policy, which is the EU's regional policy, and supports a broad range of activities to support the energy transition. More recently, we have developed something called a Just Transition Fund, which actually is targeted on those areas which are most affected by the adverse effects of the climate transition. And the idea is to support territories and workers concerned and to promote the diversification and modernization of the local economy. And then finally, we are in the process of developing a social climate fund to target the most vulnerable households, micro enterprises, and transport users. So we have a toolkit, but we need to use these tools properly. And I think we're very much convinced that this transition will not manifest itself spontaneously. It requires a coordinated effort at all levels and by all actors, whether it's public or private. And here I just want to emphasize again, we see that the regional and local, state and municipal approach is essential to a successful pursuit of this transition. And I think this is very much the focus of today. And first of all, can I wish you an excellent meeting and exchange, and we very much look forward to seeing the results of the discussions today. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, very much. You never know what the future holds for you in terms of positions. Thank you. I would like to now turn this online intervention over to Nadim Ahmad, who's the Deputy Director at the OECD's Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. Nadim, please.
Super. Thanks, Varenya. And let me also begin by apologizing for not being able to join you there. And I looked at the tour de table and I wish I was there. I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic conversation. I mean, Peter's already, I think, given you a lot of background to this event. It's a long-standing collaboration that we've had with the Commission, looking at the industrial transition and regional development policy in particular. But this focus on the transatlantic perspective is relatively new. This is the second, I think, bite at this cherry that we've had, and I think the first meeting that we had already delivered fantastic results, and I'm confident that we're going to see the same thing happening today. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. I mean, I'd like to begin also by thanking the Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Munster for hosting the event, not least because, of course, that we know that North Rhine-Westphalia is widely seen as a leader in today's critical topic, the successful climate and energy transition. And obviously, I'd like to thank you too, Peter, not just for your intervention, but also, of course, for this our long-standing collaboration. You mentioned, of course, just why this is so important. We didn't necessarily look at the climate and energy transition when we started this work on this industrial transition back 10 or so years ago. But today it's front and center, and as you said, for example, looking at any newspaper or radio piece or anything, we know, for example, that the geopolitical context, and in particular, the recent rises that we've seen in oil and gas prices, they underscore 100% the importance of this event. And indeed, of course, the importance of having a successful energy transition. So we're reminded of its importance, not just for energy transitions, of course, energy resilience, because it lowers the risk of supply disruptions and price volatility. But of course, and there's also, of course, the importance of making sure that we deliver on the climate transition. But as you yourself have said, Peter, of course, it's also, I think, really critical to drive productivity and competitiveness. And the evidence that's out there, I think, is already beginning to demonstrate exactly why it's so important that we push that agenda. We know, for example, that just by looking at using energy management systems, they can deliver savings of around 20 to 30%. And of course, when we think about access to affordable, clean electricity and low carbon inputs, these are becoming an absolute, preeminent condition, I think, for attracting investment, staying integrated into global value chains. So it's an awful lot of that is a predeterminant now, I think, for driving this industrial transition. And it's no coincidence, for example, we also look at the data that greenfield FDI in renewable energy has risen from around 1% in 2003 to 26% in 2023 of total global FDI flow. So again, we're seeing the action taking place on the ground. We're seeing the money, I think, moving in that direction. Now, regions, play a really important policy role in the success of any energy and climate transition. Of course, as part of a multi-dimensional system in cooperation with all different actors. But because the transitions themselves are, fundamentally and inherently place-based. For example, when we look at the share of green task jobs in any given country, we see big differences between the regions. So again, we see big differences in terms of the policy instruments and the policy tools that are needed to benefit from the transition, but also I think to mitigate some of the transition effects themselves. And we look, for example, in Western Greece, we see that about 7% of jobs are green task jobs, and they're up to 35% in the Vilnius region of Lithuania. So big differences internationally, but also very big differences within countries. And when we think about, for example, those regions with really high concentrations of industries with jobs that are going to be hard to decarbonize, for example, oil refining, chemicals, steel, automotive, paper, pulp production, the obvious ones, GDP per capita in those places can be around 40% below the national average. And that's really why a spatial lens and place-based policies are really critically important, because without the right enabling environment, the transitions could exacerbate those existing spatial inequalities and in turn, of course, undermine cohesion and ultimately, of course, undermine long-term growth and competitiveness. And of course, regions are best placed, I think, to understand their transition constraints and the support they need for the enabling environments that delivers this just transition that you mentioned, Peter. They best understand their industrial mix and capacities, especially, of course, of SMEs in their ecosystems. They understand best their infrastructure bottlenecks, their available skills, but also, of course, their place-based skills pathways, recognizing, for example, that the transition from one job to another is, really wants to be place-based, but also with this notion of making sure, for example, those individuals who are going to be on the losing end in terms of losing jobs, they're also able to transition to jobs in those same localities rather than far away. So again, aligning with this newfound importance of making sure that we provide the types of skills pathways that give people the ability to remain in their localities that benefit, for example, from their social connections. Of course, regions are also best placed to translate national and supranational objectives into practical action. And because much of decarbonisation is going to happen through clusters, the regions can also exercise their convening power to coordinate actors and investments in shared infrastructure and innovation platforms. Now, of course, regions can't do this alone. The enabling environment requires early, continuous and transparent engagement with all stakeholders in the system to ensure that those costs and benefits of decarbonisation are shared fairly widely. And of course, to all workers, communities and SMEs, they all need to see tangible gains. And that's why I was really delighted to see the tour de table of different actors that we have around the table here today, from the public sector, the private sector, non-profit sector, and of course, as well as academia. So that, I think, rich and diverse mix of stakeholders that we have here today also provides, the optimal conditions that we hope to see, for example, for this peer learning exchange that we're going to have now. And a particular theme, for example, of the event, but also, of course, the overall, I think, project, making sure that we benefit from the rich experiences that you all have. And again, I'm sorry I can't be with you, but I'm really looking forward to a really fantastic debate. Thank you all.
You have a lot of claps and knocks, Nadim. I hope you hear that. Thank you very much. I'd like to now move to the room and pass the floor to Mr. Fritz Dackel, who is the CEO of the North Westphalia Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Germany, and we are in his home. So thank you.
Thank you very much for introducing me. I'm the Director General of the Chamber of Commerce here in North Westphalia, which is the biggest entity in the chamber network in North Rhine-Westphalia. We are very, very proud that people from the EU Commission, from the OECD, and from other member states of the European Union attend the meeting here today under this topic, transition and powering the future, driving the energy transition in regions. As you indicated, Peter, and welcome to all the others as well, to Madame Michalon, who's the moderator today, to Peter Berkowitz from the Commission, to Nadim Ahmed, who just gave us his ideas about this afternoon. David Senjem, welcome again. We just met outside and said hello. And all the other people here in the room from partner states, from the USA, from Spain, France, Italy, Finland, Slovenia, and the Netherlands. And Sabine Engels is lovely to see you again here. I think it's 1 year ago we had a meeting here with people from Minnesota, with a delegation who visited us in our chamber. So thank you very much for attending the meeting here and to being our guests today. I just want to say some short words about the region here, about what we are doing. We represent the regions of Münsterland and Emscher Liberal region. This is the northern part of the Ruhr Valley in Germany, an economic area with 150,000 companies and 2.6 million inhabitants. Our region is strong in industrial sectors, particularly in chemicals, agriculture, food and machinery, and as well as rapidly growing fields such as energy technologies, batteries and hydrogen. I have seen that you will go on to a trip on Thursday and just meet the batteries factory and research facility of the Fraunhofer Society here in Münster. We have a very strong collaboration with the Netherlands in the techland ecosystem, and that might be perhaps a point that you could discuss together. And I invite all the partners from the European Union here, from the other member states, just to collaborate with us, to talk to us on the days ahead, what we are doing really in this network. Sebastian van Deel and all the people on this side here of the table with the government of North Rhine-Westphalia, with the universities, with this University of Applied Sciences established in the last 5 years. So we built up an ecosystem for innovation with our Dutch partners that brings together jointly industrial enterprises, science, and all the executive sector in business, science, and administration. It is a program that is designed to connect industry, science, and government across the border and to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. This initiative focuses on how innovation can reshape our industrial base, from digitalization and smart manufacturing to advanced materials and new business models. A central pillar of this techland is its strong emphasis on technologies that enable the decarbonization of the economy, including hydrogen solutions, renewable energy systems, and climate-neutral production processes. What really sets us apart from other regions is that we have a really strong cross-border involvement. So our Dutch partners are really emphasizing what they really want from us in the German economy system. And this helps them as well to make their business models better, and it helps our business models to, I would say, to reshape or to really rethink what they can do, what they can bring into. And this is an ecosystem that is really a little bit unique. I worked in a totally different environment, 25 years in politics. I was engaged in the Polish, Saxonian, and Czech Republic region in Dresden and Leipzig. And we ever tried to bring together the companies to work together, and it didn't really work at the end. It was a good collaboration of governments, it was a good relation between communities, but it never worked really for companies. So what we are looking for is now, how can we improve our collaboration in the economic sector? And therefore, this is good information for the European Commission. We are absolutely favorite towards the regime 28. And we hope that there will come a legal framework that really helps us to deepen our collaboration with our partners in the Dutch environment and in other European countries as well, like to collaborate with us in the future. So you will get, that's my hope, a lot of ideas and information in the next 48 hours. And we are very lucky that you are our guests here today. Welcome again in Münster, and have a good meeting and with very good results for everybody here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Also for highlighting that difficulty on cross-border firm collaboration. I think that's actually really very interesting. I'd like to turn the floor now to Mr. David Senjem, who is the chair of the Olmsted County Board of Commissioners in Minnesota in the US. Please.
Thank you so much. I think I'm the beg your pardon? Okay, I think I'm the we have a past politician in the audience, our chamber friend, but I may be the only politician here, and to some great extent, as we think about this, and at least if I thought about it, I'm not certainly a technical expertise, or expert, but I'm pretty good at politics, at least back in Minnesota. And a lot of this is politics. It's getting things done through other people, and that's the art of politics. You can't write it down. You have to experience. You have to live it, and as you live it, you do it. But again, it's so great to be here today. I'm so honored, humbled, in fact, that I would have an opportunity to speak before you. So, my name is Dave Senjum. I'm from Olmsted County, Minnesota. That's the upper United States, a community called Rochester, best known for a place called Mayo Clinic, which is thought to be the preeminent medical institution in the world, and employs in Rochester itself 52,000 people. So it's a major industry, and we're blessed to have it. I served 11 years on our Rochester City Council, 20 years in the Minnesota Senate, and that's where I really got interested in this energy phenomena. And in the last 4 years now, as an Olmsted County Board of Commissioners member. And so if you're keeping track of that, you realize I'm getting old. But throughout this, and most particular, and I just want to say, as we talk about the title of this, Driving the Energy Transition in Regions, and I just looked at that title and I thought, I'm going to believe, and I'm going to frankly even say that the relationship that we have had with the Republic of Germany, and more specifically North Rhine-Westphalia, this Minnesota relationship that we have had, and the University of Minnesota, a great part of that, is probably one of the great success stories, even to this day, in terms of how governments from across the pond can come together and, in fact, make great progress. We learn from you, you learn from us, and as we have done that over the course of now almost 15 years, and more specifically with climate smart municipalities in North Rhine-Westphalia for, I think, about 10 years, lots and lots of good things have happened. And I can tell you that the value of this transatlantic relationship is something to behold. And I live it, I feel it, I know it, and I just understand what it's done, frankly, for our state of Minnesota, and hopefully, to some degree, some good for North Rhine-Westphalia as well. So we've made significant advances, and I'll just go through a short litany of things, and this just happens out of the state legislative things. And by the way, I'm going to talk about some things, and I will tell you unequivocally, none of this would happen, and it's pretty major stuff. None of this would happen without the relationship that we've had with the entirety of Germany, sometimes at the federal level, but again, more specifically, this area of your country. In 2013, and I'm not going to get into details, but we passed a community solar garden bill, a big thing that started to grow solar gardens all over Minnesota. We put something together called an eco bill, which is basically an improvement on what we call the conservation improvement programs. We've set higher goals. In fact, our state gave them more money to achieve those goals. It's a big deal. We passed a renewable natural gas bill, where we get into experimental work going forward, understanding that home heating is going to be a big deal someday, and it's not going to be with fossil fuels. And so what do? We've got to figure this out. And so we've done that. Solar in schools was a big one, simple as it might be. Let's give our schools across Minnesota money so that they can have their solar panels on top of schools. And by the way, not only that, make this a teachable moment for students from the standpoint of them understanding renewable energy, solar energy, and again, acclimating them towards a clean energy thought future. And then I had this bill myself, a Clean Energy First bill, which basically said all new energy in Minnesota has to be a clean energy going forward. Well, that bill didn't pass, but in 2023, Minnesota did adopt 100% by 2040 goal for all electrical generation used in our state. And that is a huge, huge, not only challenge, which I think we're going to meet, but certainly that's a great policy effort, and at least from the standpoint of where we are. And then just thinking about that future, I'll just add, so many of other things have happened within the communities that Dr. Engel and her program had been involved with, the simple stuff like communities doing this, that, and the other thing. And that none of this would have happened but for this German Minnesota relationship. So it's just, from my point of view, just something that is there to behold and to appreciate beyond measure in terms of what we have going. Dr. Engel brings interns over here every year, I think maybe for the last 5, 6, 7, I'm not sure. And they come back to Minnesota, and who knows where they go beyond that. But these people are ambassadors to clean energy when they come back. We have wrap-up sessions, and we get to see how these people over the course of 10 days have evolved in thought and thinking and become the kind of people that you want going forward to represent this concept. So, and then many other things. Dr. Engel is going to be getting a grant this year for a sizable amount of money to work with counties across Minnesota. And again, I go back to repeat, none of this would have happened. All this has its birthright at the focus of this relationship with Germany. And even going forward, almost more momentous than that is a national county organization, which we have in the United States, 3,096 counties. We are starting what we call a rural energy academy, where we're going to begin to again acclimate, not unlike what we do in Minnesota, county commissioners from across the United States and this clean energy idea through virtuality and things like that. So all kinds of good things happening. But ours is just a story of doing it. It's just really simple. I don't think we have a great big recipe. I don't think we've written white papers about this or anything like that. We just go out and do it. And the story is simple. As we think about, and I talked to Dr. Engel a lot about, this is a lot about mood and appetite. You got to have the mood and you got to have the appetite to do it. And if you have those kind of things, and if you have a little, what we call buzz and hum going with it, then you've got the energy to make things happen. And by the way, I will tell you that from my perspective, and I think all involved would say this, the relationship with Germany has been fun. And if it's not fun, don't do it. Because it's not worth it. And that makes it all, frankly, just all the better. So the future of energy in our world is not the past, it's what it will be. There's no question about that. Clean energy is the future of this world. I think we know that. It's not easy. It's not without controversy. As I tell Dr. Engel, in the end, clean always wins over dirty. It's that simple. Clean always wins over dirty. And again, I appreciate being here and being part of this, and really look forward to going back to Minnesota with new information and a lot of new relationships. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and for also showing, illustrating so well advances in energy, clean energy in Minnesota, and also the power of this transatlantic relationship. And I'm really hoping we're going to be able to discuss some more of that and more about what you get out of this relationship throughout our time together in the next couple of days, and how to make that relationship very practical. I think that's going to be important for everyone in the room. So thank you very much for these opening remarks. I think everyone has set the stage very nicely for the rest of our agenda today, which is going to begin with a keynote presentation, and then it'll be followed by 2 roundtable discussions. And there'll be a short break in between both of the roundtable discussions. So I'd like to launch us into our keynote presentation. It's a bit of a scene setting. It is founded on a expert paper that I think everyone has received. I hope you've had a chance to look through it or read it. There are 3 key topics that we are going to be focusing on. One is the future-oriented energy transition, and we were just hearing about the future and moving towards it. The other, and also, a future-oriented energy transition and the importance of mobilizing local communities to manage these trade-offs is a second point. And a third is the multi-level governance and the roles of regions in the energy transition, which were also touched upon in the opening remarks. So I would like to give the floor to Dr. Suyash Joly, who is a senior researcher at the Department of Human Geography and Regional Development at the University of Ostrava in Czechia. So Dr. Joly, please.
Yeah, so I would like to thank the OECD for this opportunity to present this paper. And so basically, this paper is focusing on how can regions manage this ongoing transition in a very positive way. And also it focuses on understanding that the power of cross-regional learning, which was just talked about. So maybe, can I see the slides? Yeah. So this presentation is mainly focused on understanding that how we can drive this energy and climate transition agenda, and what are the key challenges and what are the key solutions. So the next slide. Yeah. So as you can see that these are some of the main findings, and main findings from the paper, which you can read from the paper, but I would just like to emphasize them. So one of the first, key lesson is that the regional strategies for energy and climate transitions need to reflect the place-based identity. So what I'm emphasizing is that the regions need to develop their strategy based on like their inherent cultural values, their socio-economic identity, and rather than just taking some lessons from other regions. So this is the first important lessons. Say the second important lesson is that the regions do not need to act alone. This is not like a journey which regions can do alone. So they need the support from the municipalities, the local communities, as well as the national and supranational actors. So it's a very coordinated approach where all the actors come together, they act together collectively, and this is how we drive the regional transitions forward. So the third important lesson is to kind of also understand that whenever we are focusing on these transitions, they are also like what we call negative drawbacks, which is like the industrial workers or indigenous communities or socially excluded groups, actually, like farmers or like the Sami communities in northern Finland, Norway, or Sweden. They also sometimes get marginalized during these energy transitions. There have been a lot of documented cases of how the energy transitions also create like these negative impacts. So it's very important to kind of bring these stakeholders together early on in the process and to understand their concerns, before developing these regional strategies. So the next important lesson is that the tools we develop, there are a lot of different tools which can be used to steer the energy and climate transitions, but they must also fit the local context. This is very important because a tool which might have worked in Minnesota might not work in, example, Emilia Romagna in Italy, or similarly in northern Finland. So the tools are very contextual. So that is the fourth lesson. And then the fifth lesson is that this cross-regional learning is very essential, and regions need to kind of support each other and also mentor each other. For example, the leading regions can mentor the struggling regions. So there is this cross-regional learning, which is very essential. But then after learning, the lessons need to be adapted to the very specific regional setting. So these are the key messages. So the next one. As you can see that one of the main emphasis is also on providing this future-oriented approach, which is very important because as we move into the future, there are a lot of complex challenges, and future is always uncertain. But there is no need to worry because we also have a lot of different strategies to understand the complexities in the future and how we can plan ahead. So one of the first challenges is that regions face a lot of these compounding socio-economic pressures at the same time. Say the second risk, which I have already discussed, is that this green discontent or green colonialism, which is basically focusing on understanding that these energy transitions or climate transitions can also create a lot of tensions with the local communities, and when they feel that these energy transitions are not really helping them. And it's also kind of like this historic colonialism practices. So these could also create further inequality. So it's very important to always respect the local and cultural rights before developing any kind of energy and climate transition strategy. And then the third is that the regions are also facing multiple kinds of trade-offs. Example, how to create green jobs, how to protect the environment, how to also create social equity. And so therefore one of the challenges that say often the national policies cannot be sufficient to meet them because the regions are facing say a lot of these competing challenges at the same time. So the next one. So as you can see in the paper, this is this kind of model which helps us to understand that how we can steer this future transitions. So as you can see in the left is the historical context of the region, and then on the middle path is the present development trajectory, and then on the right is the different kinds of the paths the region can take to create like specific kinds of hybrid future. And on the left hand side, the top column is the impact of the disruptive events, which are basically like the geopolitical events like wars, or example, future pandemics, or example, another kind of climate crisis, which can also impact the regional trajectory. So if you go on the next slide. Yeah, so if you see, it's a very step-by-step process. So if you look at point one, is like say the main thing is here is that the region's fossil fuel past actually is one of the key factors which also creates this kind of lock-in, which basically means that, example, coal-dependent regions are sometimes locked in into existing skills, assets, and institutions, which do not let it create a new trajectory. And this is the historical context. But then in the next step, there are these structural conditions and agents of change who actually drive this transition forward. And then the regions create, example, different kinds of say futures together to kind of create hybrid paths. So one example is like say the region of Skåne in Sweden. In the 1990s, they started developing this biogas industry based on utilizing the waste from agriculture and say the slaughterhouses. And then in the say and in like 2010 onwards, it also started focusing on the electric vehicle industry. And so example, say the region was very proactive in kind of steering and supporting both these industries together for low carbon transportation. So these hybrid paths can be developed. And then the fifth stage is where these external shocks, as mentioned, like pandemics or energy crisis or climate disasters, can also shape the regional trajectories either in a positive way or in a negative way. So it's very important to also understand how regions are affected by these external shocks. And then the national and supranational governance can also either accelerate or hinder regional transitions. So example, I conducted a study comparing offshore wind energy in Denmark and France. And one of the key reasons was that the region of South Denmark would accelerate the offshore wind industry because there was very good coordination between the southern Denmark region and the national government. Whereas in case of France, there was kind of sometimes misalignment or lack of effective coordination between Normandy region and, example, the French government. So this is very important to have very good coordination between the regional level and the national and supranational level. So this model helps to kind of overall present this future-oriented trajectory. So the next one. Yeah, and within this paper, you can also find this place-based trends and what are the different tools. And these tools are, example, very important for the regions to understand that how they can map their key strengths for future energy and climate transitions. So one example of a tool is like energy culture ethnography, which is basically means that it's important to map the local energy norms and cultural values, and also how communities are attached to their local landscapes. And this is very important because then it prevents this very important problem, which is called NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard. Very often we see that when the renewable energy is installed in like small villages or urban centers, it always creates this resistance from the local citizens or the public or the communities. And so, example, before installing these large solar plants or wind energy turbines, it's important to use these tools to understand that how it could create a potential backlash and what are the challenges. But one of the key trade-offs is also that these kinds of tools are also, example, very time-consuming and costly. It could take, example, 1 or 2 years to study the cultural patterns or how people relate to the landscape. And but it is very useful to understand the social backlash. But then very often the findings can be very difficult to translate into any kind of formal policy. So these are also one of the trade-offs. The next approach is the regional transition arenas, and this approach has been tried a lot in the Dutch policy landscape. To example, to kind of build high social capital between the different regional actors, and to also create these front runner actors. And these transition arenas are basically sheltered policy spaces where certain kinds of actors like leaders are empowered to create future visions like of energy like till 2040, 2050, build very strong local coalitions, and then identify certain place-based strengths. But one of the challenges of this tool is also that very often the stakeholders who are chosen, they can also be a bit elite in nature, and and often they can drive this transition process without involving like the general public or the civil society actors or example NGOs. And again, the challenge is that these transition arenas, they produce a lot of good insights and a lot of good learnings, but very often the challenge is also to translate back into some kind of strong regional binding policy. So this is also one of the challenges associated with it. So the next one. And in terms of the designing the future-oriented pathways, there have also been different kinds of tool used. And the first one is this deliberative mini publics, say sometimes a randomly selected citizen groups, are kind of selected to deliberate on a complex regional climate and energy challenge. It could be example to citing decisions for renewable energy technologies, to example designing the future energy visions for the community. And this is very essential because it helps to increase the legitimacy among the citizens for the transition decisions, because the public is involved, everybody gets together, they discuss. It also helps to provide the say the regional say policymakers say regarding information regarding what are the key priorities of the citizens and what they want in the future, what are the challenges they face, and what should be done. And this tool example has also been applied in case of like the by the UK Climate Change Committee on home energy decarbonization. So this is one example. But again, the challenge with this tool is that very often the citizens who are chosen for such assessments or exercises in these deliberative mini publics, they could be a very small sample size, and their perspective may not represent the perspective of the entire community or the entire region. And very often these policymakers can also pick up sometimes certain favorable recommendations which they like, overlooking other kinds of recommendations. So this tool also is very advantageous in certain terms, but it also presents disadvantage in other terms. And the next tool is the future-oriented industrial path, this kind of scenarios, where the focus is on understanding the, say, the existing regional industrial base of a region, and then kind of understanding that what kind of future paths it can develop specifically for energy and climate transition. So there could be example, different paths like transformation or preservation or decline or stagnation. So transformation basically focuses on changing from existing traditional industry to new green industries. Preservation and decline, say kind of focus. So example, the decline and stagnation focuses on example, not doing anything new with the green transformation, but just sticking to the existing industry and doing incremental innovation. And preservation could also mean example, moving into new kinds of practices like making the region more say attractive for tourism or regenerative agriculture, or example elderly care, completely different sector, say other than the industrial technologies or new green technologies, because this is also kind of close to the degrowth perspective where say it is not important to just focus on new sectors, new industries, but to also preserve whatever is left and to turn it into say kind of to turn it for kind of the public welfare, which is like example making it suitable for cultural context or artistic communities or elderly care or regenerative agriculture, which try to preserve the region rather than just industrial development. And so example, I did the study of a case study of a Helgeland region in Nordland in northern Norway, where I kind of designed these different scenarios. But when I did this assessment, I found that it is very useful example to develop certain green scenarios or understand what are the different trajectories. But very often the challenges are that there is often very limited stakeholder engagement from example civil society or like the local public or like the indigenous stakeholders like Sami in the Norwegian context. So there is a risk of the limited stakeholder engagement. And another challenge is that when we design these future scenarios, they can also become a bit technocratic because very often we involve like the industry. Because when we involve the industrial actors, they often want to create future visions for like which are very much close to their expertise, and then these future scenarios can often become technocratic in nature, like prioritizing hydrogen development, prioritizing certain types of like the battery manufacturing, which is also very good. But then it also lacks like the broader stakeholder participation. So in this case, I found example that while in this region, it was very much emphasized to focus on the battery manufacturing, or example, the wind energy. But then the example, the Sami stakeholders or other local stakeholders sometimes do not align with these future visions, which are very industrial oriented. So therefore, we also need a kind of a balance between different visions. So the next one. And then in the paper, you can also see these different future scenarios or transition pathways which the region can take, and they depend on the kind of the basic characteristics of the region. So for example, for urban and metropolitan region, this first pathway, which is called the radical recombination, is very ideal because then say these regions already have a lot of existing strengths, and they can combine knowledge and expertise from different sectors like energy or ICT, and they can take strategic advantage. So one example is like the Emilia-Romagna region. Now it is focusing on the advanced manufacturing, renewables, the circular economy, and it is kind of combining the strengths from these different from different sectors to create very unique kind of advantage for itself. So this is the first pathway, which is the radical recombination. And then the next is the grassroots pathway, which is basically more suitable for example, small island communities or small urban centers, where the focus is on designing the, sorry, backwards. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, yeah. And Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And so the focus is on designing for the small island communities. Example, the Sanso Island in Denmark is one example. And then the third is the just diversification, where example, the historically the coal dependent or peripheral industrial regions can kind of create very small kind of green niches, like example in energy transition or tourism or regenerative agriculture or reclaiming the mining sites to create some kind of social justice for the communities. And there is example of like the Moravian Silesian region in Czechia or Appalachian region, which is also kind of doing this diversification. Yeah, the next one. And as you can see, these are the three different dimensions of justice. And now we focus on the good practices for engaging local communities. And we could kind of summarize them into like the regulatory sandboxes, indigenous-led partnerships, and example, regional climate assemblies, and more practices can be found in the paper. So these regulatory sandboxes help communities to test new energy models like regulations or like peer-to-peer energy learning or trading, to test them and then to apply them in the larger context. Indigenous-led partnership models are very helpful for example, to help the traditional indigenous communities work together with the private companies, to example, create like what you call true wealth for the indigenous communities. Because very often when these projects are done in the indigenous lands, especially in case of like Quebec or Alberta, or example in many of the northern Finland and Sweden and Norway. So there have been a lot of marginalization of the rights of the indigenous communities. But then these models help to make it more equitable for the indigenous communities so that their rights are not marginalized. And then we have the regional climate assemblies, where a certain group of citizens, they come together and then they focus on addressing very local specific energy and climate challenges, and to provide more democratic legitimacy for regional transition decisions. And there have been example of climate assemblies in Washington State, or an example in Estonia. So the next one.
Dr. Jolie, I think we may need to move to the conclusions soon. So
yeah, we can go to the conclusion. Yeah. So if you see, then some of the main lessons is that that there is no one size fit all solution for all the regions, and they need to kind of do it on their place-based assessment. It is very important to empower the local level, and this multi-level governance is very important. It's also very important to address the multi-dimensional justice issues, which are very critical. And then the peer learning, which has been talked about, also needs to be made more honest, including sharing both the success and the failure lessons. And then it is also very important to manage the trade-offs in the regional energy and climate transitions very effectively by kind of building very strong capacity for multi-level governance. Yeah. So I would like to thank you for this your presentation. Yeah.
Dr. Jolie, thank you very much for your presentation and for so clearly laying out the different pathways and different tools. That I think that was very, very useful for all of us. I would like to ask our participants here and also online if anyone has any questions for Dr. Jolie at this moment. Also online. Anyone has any questions, any remarks, anything they'd like to say? Yeah, please. And then, yeah.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Claudia Romano from Emilia-Romagna region government, and thank you for your research work. I would like to ask you, what I found very interesting is the multiple stages approach with the past, present, and so on, analysis on the industrial economic development of the region. And would like to ask you if you found any examples of this kind of approach driven on one side or the other one or the Atlantic Ocean, because I think it would be very useful for companies and research system together with the governments to understand where do they are at the moment in their development, in their path toward the future, and also the future approach, because it seems to me that as regions, with a place-based approach, we should try to drive together the, how can I say, the public and private perspective in trying to find and to define what's our risk appetite towards the future transition. So it's clear that we must choose what to leave and what to go towards for. And so how can we, if you find some examples of this multiple stages approach, and if you had suggestions, practical suggestions to identify where to prioritize the transition with the multiple industrial situations. So where to move on first, where to move on afterwards, because you have in the same time, you also have to define a multiple pace transition for different industrial sector, for example. Thank you. Sorry for the long question.
Yeah, okay. So it's a very, very good question, and thank you for asking this question. I think, like what you asked, this model is actually developed by me actually in one of the studies I did, and it's a case study of the Norwegian region in Helgeland in northern Norway. Can you hear me or?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. So example, this model was developed by me on a case study of the Norwegian region, Helgeland in Nordland in northern Norway. And so what I did was I studied the region for last 50 years and the different kinds of the transitions from example 1950 to 1970s, and then 70s to 90s, and then say from the current time from 2000 till the current time. And I mapped them in different phases, that how the industrial transition is going on in different stages and how it is changing over time, and who are the new kinds of actors or stakeholders who are emerging and what role they are playing. And then based on this historical assessment, identifying the strengths, then we did kind of 3 different workshops with all the stakeholders in the region. And then we try to map like what through these workshops, different workshops, that what are the different priorities of the stakeholders in terms of like what they want to prioritize for the future. So example, as I mentioned, that some stakeholders were interested in, example, the battery manufacturing or like the regional industrial development kind of say the path, and some stakeholders wanted some other kinds of like hydrogen development or green hydrogen. So so in terms of the managing these different pathways, I think is very crucial, because what happens is that very often the regional government has often very limited resources, so they cannot support like many different paths in terms of like the support or the subsidy. So very often what has happened in the past case studies is that sometimes the regional government starts prioritizing one path less over the other path because of the lack of resources. And and for example, in case of Skåne, they initially supported the biogas industry, but later they found that the electric vehicle was much better for solving the transportation problems. So they started giving more support to the say the electric vehicle industry, and then started left the biogas industry for a certain time period. And so what is, I think, the lesson is that it requires a very good stakeholder arena where the regional policymakers need to invite say the stakeholders from different paths, and can see if they have a competitive relation, or if they have a collaborative relation, or if they are neutral towards each other. so that they don't, take away the resources from each other, because it also leads to more competition, and it leads to, example, also more challenges in the future. So this is one important lesson. And like in terms of the case studies, I have not done any like empirical studies myself in, example, North America and Canadian context, but I think there are certain cases which I can look up to and maybe inform OECD about if there are certain cases which also have done similar kind of analysis here.
Thank you very much for your answer, and we'd be very happy to pass along any additional information you might have to share. I think there was one other question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Jolly, for your information. I really appreciate your focus on the local level. But at the same time, I wonder if it isn't a bit difficult for local authorities to organize the infrastructural change that comes with the energy, the Energiewende, the energy change, as we call it in Germany, in a grassroots-like approach just on a local level. What do you see is the important support that has to be delivered on the state level or the national level? What do you see there? That is also important in terms of providing the leadership, providing the big picture, the instrument and the legal framework, and of course the resources. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the question. And as you have rightly mentioned, that I have emphasized a lot on the local level, because very often we saw that say the regional energy and climate strategies or the national level strategies, they all start with very good policy intentions, like they want to have like climate neutral economy, create green jobs, and create the kind of the supposed benefits of the energy and climate transitions. But very often we saw empirically in many of the cases across, example, Europe, that it did not lead to the supposed benefits as as they were promised. Example, green jobs were created, but they were not in such high numbers, or the emission targets were achieved, but not in such high numbers. And then these resistance cases were also quite a lot. Example, in the case of Northern Norway, where they built a lot of wind turbines for the industry and for green transition. But it started, in a lot of court cases, protests by the Sami stakeholders. So this is very important in terms of like the mobilizing and understanding the local level. But as you also say that the local level often also has very limited resources and power to kind of steer this change. And therefore in this paper, I also provide example using this multi-level governance concept, that how the national and the regional stakeholders can empower the local change agents and kind of work together with them in very specific ways, because we need this national and the regional and the local level strong partnerships, because the implementation on the ground is often done by the local change agents or the local leaders, and so therefore empowering them is very, very important. So this is also one of the key lessons there.
Thank you very much. Does that cover it? Anyone else before we move on to our first roundtable? And no one online. Okay. Dr. Joly, thank you very, very much for the paper, for the presentation, for sharing your insights. It was a pleasure to meet you online. And I think we will now close this session and move to our first roundtable. So thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Joly. So our first roundtable, from national to community level, precisely what our colleague from Stuttgart was mentioning. We're going to focus on two themes. One is mobilizing local communities and actors in decision-making and managing trade-offs. And the second is really precisely this question of vertical coordination among different levels of government. So before we start, I invite you to pull out your phones or computers and take a moment to respond to the question on the Slido. The first question that you should see is, what are the success factors for mobilizing regional and local communities in energy and climate initiatives. So if you take a moment and type in your thoughts, that would be great. For our online participants, I think you can click on the link that is in the chat. And then tell me when it should show. I think the results are going to show up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
There you go. You're welcome. Can you people? The string of people on the bottom. Can you move them up or somewhere? The windows. No, it's okay. Okay, it's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah. I think we'll close this in about 2 seconds. Okay. Okay. Great. So I think we're gonna, yeah. I think a few things came out. I haven't read them all, but really quickly, some main points that seemed to come out were this notion of leadership and political will. Also questions of participation, engage early, be collaborative, have open dialogue. And I think 2 that came out that were really interesting and we haven't mentioned, but I think we might want to think about are incentives. So incentives for participation and showing the benefits and really why bother engaging. Thank you very much. I think we'll move on to one other Slido very quickly, which the question that you'll have is what are the success factors for mobilizing higher level actors, so provincial, state, or national, in supporting regional energy and climate initiatives? Oh, okay. Ah, voilà. Okay. Okay. Great. I think we'll stop there. Some things that were similar was bringing people in early, as well as funding and showing the benefits. So it seems to work both for government actors as it does for citizens. Interestingly, was failed projects. I don't know who put that up, but eventually I'd like to speak to them because I'd be very curious about that. I think that sharing failed projects is actually really interesting. Funds and region. Okay, great. And win-win collaboration. Good. So we will move now into the main part of our roundtable, and we are running behind, which is not surprising. And I'd like to introduce the format. We will start with North Rhine-Westphalia, the hosting region, is going to share their experience to kick off the discussion. We will have a couple of online interventions, and I will introduce the speakers as we go along. And then we're going to open the floor to all participants. You've received questions for consideration, and what we would really like to do is just have a dialogue among yourselves, with us, but let's really talk about some of the issues that have been coming out in this roundtable and what we've been hearing through the keynote presentation. So I would like to now turn the floor to Mr. Christoph Wetter, who is professor from the University of Applied Sciences in North Rhine-Westphalia here in Germany, to briefly, underscored, share the community-led energy transition experience here in Münster. So Professor Wetter.
Thank you very much for introducing me. I have a question. Who of you will join us tomorrow to Saarbeck? Can I see your hands? Oh, that looks perfectly. So I will be very brief, very short, because we have the possibility to speak a little bit more about Saarbeck tomorrow. And I'm very happy to have the mayor of Saarbeck on my side, especially for the Q&A after the short presentation. So I will tell you a little bit more about Saarbeck, which is important now that Saarbeck was the winner of the Climate Smart Community competition in 2008. And since then, I'm a part of the steering committee. And we thought about how would it be possible to win this competition. And on the next slide, you see Saarbeck. This is what you see in white. This is the borders of Saarbeck. And in there, the gray one, this is the bioenergy park, or let's say the 2-day bioenergy park. And the lines, this is not the map of the metro, but these are all the activities, the projects, the ideas which we figured out to win that competition. On the next slide, you see the 3 lead projects on the upper side right. This is the Saarbecker Sonnenseite, which means photovoltaic on private roofs, and also the Saarbecker Einsichten, which means renewable transparent heating center. And the third is the Steinfurter Stoffströme. This is mostly located at the bioenergy park, which we will see tomorrow. Then we defined 7 fields of action, which you could see on the left side, which is the bioenergy park itself, because most of the projects are carried out there. Then we have the education, transfer, and citizen participation, because in our mind, we think that the education is the most important part of the whole thing. We started in 2008. And children who were born in this year are now going to finalize their school education. So you see how fast the time is running. Then the material flow management, which is also very important, the climate change or climate adaptation, the settlement, transport, mobility, the marketing, public relations, management, controlling, and finance. And we were putting all this into what we called the integrated climate protection and adaptation concept, which has 50 pages. And within these 50 pages, we elaborated 154 single measures, which we can see on the next page. That means what we did is to describe in detail what we were intending to do. You see that on the next slide. And this is an example for our Excel sheets, which we did, describing all of these 154 measures in detail, saying who would do that, what is the goal, and what will be the costs, and how could we manage to carry that out. We carried out most of these projects during the last 17 years. And how did we do that? You can see on the next slide, this is the Saarbeck diamond. I think it's difficult to read it, but you will get the handout afterwards. I'm telling you what you see on the upper left. This is the educational advisors. So we tried and we succeeded to integrate all local actors into this project. So all the educational advisors, the school, and all the organizations which are teaching anything. Then we have the close loop to the associations and to the citizens. That means in Saarbeck, there are more than 50 clubs organized. This is only 7,100 inhabitants, but we have more than 50 clubs. That means nearly everybody is in more than one club. That means if you have the clubs on your side, then it's easy to reach the people, because these people who are organized in clubs are those people who are willing to do anything and to change the situation. Then the municipality itself, it's very important to have all the meter workers of the municipality on your side, because they have to carry more load during these kind of projects. Then the schools and kindergartens, who are also active part of the whole project. For example, we have the little investigators. They have to fulfill 3 tasks, and if they fulfilled these tasks, then the mayor comes and gives them a stamp and a sign, and they get a passport being a small or little investigator. Then we have external experts, which we included from the first day, like our university, for example. We have now research facilities at Saarbeck since more than 10 years. You will see that tomorrow. And also the skilled trades, the commerce, because money plays always an important role. And we were gaining 1.1 million within this competition, but it was possible to raise more than 80 million euros of money for investigations in Saarbeck. And what's also important is to have the crafts and the trading on your side. That means we had a lot of actions together with the local craftsmen and trade. And we also included other partners, because Saarbeck is not an island and don't want to be an island. That means that we are including also the cities around Saarbeck, and the county of Saarbeck plays an important role. Also, the ministries of North Rhine-Westphalia play an important role. So that means we are part of the whole thing, so that we are not an island. This is also very important. On the next slide, you can see where we were setting the focus concerning the climate action package. So firstly, we were speaking about renewable electricity. Then we were speaking about and are speaking about renewable heat. You will hear about that tomorrow as well, and about renewable and sustainable mobility. On the next slide, you see the energy monitor. It is possible to see online what is the actual quantity of renewable power, which is Saarbeck producing, so everybody could see that. And you will see the link here, and you have also the possibility to see online what is the actual production of power in Saarbeck. On the next slide, you see where we are now. So the idea was to produce more power at any time, and the red line is the consumption of Saarbeck of power, and we are now producing more than 400% of the needed power of the community. And the goal is that we produce in 2030 at any time all the energy which uses the community. That means electricity, heat, and also the energy for transportation. And we do that with an open mind. And on the last slide, you can see who visited Saarbeck during the last 17 years. And in the center, you can see the picture. These are where the visitors to Saarbeck came from. You see from all over the world, and we are very happy to receive people from all over the world, as you can see in these photos around. And we have a close cooperation with many other cities in the world who have the same in mind and the same ideas and the same goals. So we are doing that to show how that could happen, and we are very happy that we are able to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation and for showing us how much is going on in Sarawak over the years. I would like to move us along and give the screen to Colleen Doherty, who's the Director of the Regional Collaboration and Economic Development at Infinite Erie and the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership in the United States, to join us as a discussant and to share her perspective on how to foster community engagement for climate and energy initiatives in regions. And welcome, Colleen. Thank you for joining us. You have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Colleen Doherty, and I'm actually speaking from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is a legacy industrial city on the Great Lakes in PA. Erie is going to be a big reflection of what's happening in a lot of different industrial regions of the US, where two different transitions are happening kind of simultaneously. So we have long-term economic restructuring from that industrial side, as well as this emerging energy and climate transition that we're talking about today. And I want to reiterate one point quickly, that in places like Erie, Pennsylvania, climate policy cannot be separated from economic development. Industrial or an energy transition is experienced hyperlocally as industrial, workforce, and community transition. And today I'll briefly talk a little bit about some things happening hyperlocally in Erie. And then you heard my role, which is a very unique perspective, I think, given to this talk, talking about how we can organize ourselves to think about across the aisle, how we work with both private and nonprofit folks, as well as a little bit in the scope of the transatlantic relationship. So as you heard, I'm in a unique joint position between Infinite Erie and the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership, which was created intentionally to align regional strategy with economic development implementation. So I'm working at two different organizations focusing on this quote unquote radical collaboration model. So we're bridging institutions, we're aligning civic and economic leadership, and we're coordinating across different sectors. Obviously, a chamber being a little bit more focused on the firm side, and Infinite Erie focuses on the economic development ecosystem as a whole. In practice, no single institution has the capacity to manage structural transition or energy transition alone. And so I'm the first step at this coordination to make it so that these efforts don't become fragmented, or, as we see a lot of times in Erie or smaller regions, duplicative. And this model does require a lot of buy-in from different leadership. I'm funded through a bunch of different funders in Erie. And then I used to work for Bruce Katz over at the NOAC Metro Finance Lab. And so he really has written a lot about this extensively, and how, something with metropolitan governance, that my role is a pretty big part of doing that radical collaboration. I also want to take a moment, though, to say that I was a non-resident fellow with Das Progressive at Centrum, or the Progressive Center. I worked on the Industrial Heartlands Fellow Working Group, focused on democracy, climate, work, and innovation in different industrial regions. And we were a group of different young professionals working across the industrial heartland space, wanting to share best practices, wanting to share policy recommendations across the transatlantic, which I think also speaks to that radical collaboration side of things. We were from all different sectors, nonprofit, private, the government, in both Germany and the United States. And so we traveled through the United States and also west and eastern side of Germany. We engaged with local leaders such as mayors, unions, economic development organizations, and civic leadership. We went to places that you've all probably familiar with: Pittsburgh, Erie, Youngstown, Detroit, the Ruhr region, Lustatia, Cottbus, Görlitz. And our goal was really to understand how these different regions navigated this economic restructuring. And the major thing that I want to focus on today is how we maintain community trust during those types of transition, because both the industrial and the climate transition, in my mind, are really a big intersection. So we observed in both the US and Germany a lot of different similar structural pressures: economic vulnerability, demographic change, political polarization, declining institutional trust. I'm sure you're all feeling this in your own way, hyperlocally, regionally, wherever you sit. And these dynamics are especially visible in these post-industrial regions, because these historically powered national economies, and now they're feeling left out of these contemporary growth patterns that we're seeing in a lot of spaces. So this was the core challenge that we were trying to solve: was how do we do this structural and climate transformation while maintaining trust? We ended up seeing a lot of different lessons across it, and I'm happy to dive in. I know that we're a little bit short on time, but I do want to say that there was a lot of distributional tension around climate policy, both in the US and Europe. because it sits at so many different intersections of that economic restructuring, of that regional identity, of energy affordability, especially in Europe, and then also the concerns about the industrial decline. So decarbonization was accepted as necessary, but it was not experienced as a purely environmental issue. Instead, communities saw it as through the lens of jobs and regional economic stability. And how do this impact our traditional industries? Especially with the invasion of Ukraine. I don't have to, speak at length about this because you all are familiar with what's going on. But when you intensify this pressure on these energy intensive sectors such as steel and chemicals and heavy manufacturing, it really became tightly linked with that industrial competitiveness and energy security, which we saw a fragmentation of that trust. I know that we have folks here from the Ruhr, and we had a really good and interesting conversation about how you've transitioned away from coal and steel, benefiting from your strong universities, your logistics assets, your regional infrastructure. And there was some cautious optimism around these assets positioning the Ruhr to adapt to the next phase of industrial transformation. But one thing that we heard a lot was a relatively weak startup culture, which in the United States, we have a very different lens from hyperlocally. So in Youngstown, we went to the business incubator where the startup development has been central to regional renewal. So just one thing to continue to remember there is that was one of the major things that we saw as a difference. In Eastern Germany, it was a little bit different. We saw a transition away from lignite coal, but you're facing a lot of demographic decline, difficulty retaining skilled workers. We experienced firsthand the Deutsche Bahn's difficulty connecting to major cities like Berlin, and how a lot of people would rather not relocate. And so that makes it hard to attract talent and kind of reinforces that uneven regional development that we're seeing. So all of this to be said, a lot of these examples just reinforce that these climate industrial transitions can't be separated from regional development conditions. And even with strong national or European Union policies, success is going to ultimately depend on that infrastructure, that workforce capacity, institutional coordination, which we're here to talk about today and what my role directly showcases, and whether or not communities actually believe that the transition creates a viable economic future. That was the main thing we had. How do you sustain trust? And the way that we found, which I think one person's already mentioned today, was that change has to be visible and credible. We have to see tangible improvements. We have to see, new economic opportunities. And we have to see institutions that are capable of actually delivering these results, whether that's civic infrastructure, where there's going to be strong networks of community leaders and local institutions, not just the government top down telling people what to do. Communication has to be grounded locally. In the United States, we're really bad at promising a lot of these distant mega projects sometimes that is going to happen, or these abstract climate targets. But, we're trying to focus a little bit more on being a little bit more grounded. And then lastly, as I had mentioned, wanting to see those tangible improvements. I want to take a moment too, because I know that I don't have too much time, but talk about Ezra Klein's book, Abundance. I don't know if anybody's read it recently, but it was a good reread for me, talking about setting ambitious policy goals and being, less effective, especially in the United States, at building the infrastructure to meet them, because we just need to make sure that we're having the ability to have that implementation capacity. Erie's a city of plans. We're notoriously bad at just being a city of plans and not actually executing. So I'm going to challenge people, and I'm curious to, lead the conversation around how you go from the planning phase to the actual implementation phase, even if everybody's on the same page, especially with the lack of capital that we're kind of experiencing now. And then one last thing that we focus on in Erie is we can't, and we're seeing this hyperlocally. When we brought Europeans in to view some of the buildings that we were looking at, they were shocked that we didn't have LEED certified buildings. But the reality is that we have limited development capital. We're relying right now solely on Pennsylvania, solely on the state. We're getting some money federally, but I don't have to, talk at length about how the federal government currently is interacting with different localities and regions. Requiring full certification is just going to mean that projects don't move forward. And so if we're not having things happen on the ground level, that takes us back to that trust phase. We're going to have to find our own ways, and we have found our own ways to encourage energy efficient improvements or different transitional improvements in the energy and climate space without it not having to rely on specific certifications, because that's something that a lot of people get hung up on at the end of the day. And then we also are really focusing on how we make sure regionally that we are not planning just for what the federal policy environment is now. It shifts so quickly. You all experience this, we experience this. And so we've been focusing a lot in Erie on how we develop strategies that are pretty durable across these political cycles, not dependent on federal policy windows. We had that federal largesse of capital coming in from the Biden administration, and now we're in a different environment. But Erie has stayed this course. We know our plans, we know our path, and we're focusing on making sure that we can just continue to support our workforce development, economic development. So that's not to say that climate isn't an important concern. It's just not always a primary organizing political issue for a lot of spaces here. But more recently, I'm sure we can have a whole conversation about data centers that has become, again, part of the forefront. So I'll leave it there. I know that there's a little bit open-ended stuff that I'm happy to answer questions about, but really just this coordination with my role, what we've experienced across the transatlantic relationship, and remembering, that level setting, I think at the United States level is where I want to ground here today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Colleen, very much. And for bringing up a couple of really important points about the difference or about the role of startup culture, about this need to plan and think beyond political cycles because they come and go, but hopefully the plans and the implementation stays. And you brought up a really good point about planning versus implementing. And I think that's going to be an open question for all of us maybe in a moment. So I would like to open the floor to all of us here. I'd like to thank our two discussants, Christophe and Colleen. I know that Thierry Saint-Cyr at Innovate Quebec had some things he wanted to share with us as well. So while all of you think about your questions and what you would like to share and what you might like to elaborate on, I will turn this over to Thierry for a moment.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. I think in terms of good practice, and it will sound obvious for everyone around the table here, collaboration is very important. Local collaboration, we have talked about it a lot, but also international collaboration, and that's why we are here all about. At Innovate here in Quebec, we are promoting, supporting, and subsidizing collaborative research. And we put people that have a challenge together with people that have expertise, and the other partners as the opposite challenge and the opposite expertise. And that's how we made a project that progress quickly and that goes on the field very quickly. That's a very effective way to do energy transition project. However, this differential advantages at the local level is sometimes hard to find. Because, well, at the local level we have the same expertises and the same challenges. So going abroad, going to see what's happening outside and what are the other opportunities, help us find a solution, and it also help us to raise social acceptability of the project. In French here in Quebec, we have an expression. I asked DPL to translate it. No one is a prophet in their own country. I don't know if that exists in English as an expression, but typically it's one thing to say to citizens here in Quebec, for example, yes, we can do that kind of project. It will be beneficial for our community, and we have to convince him. That's pretty difficult, doable, but difficult. But it's easier if we can say, yes, we can do that project, and you know what? There's a community in Finland that is already doing it, and they have success, and they can do it. So often, what we are doing today and working together and sharing our experiences and collaboration is another way to raise social acceptability because of this phenomenon that people tend to say, well, if people at the other side of the world can do it, well, we can do it. I think it's very important. And here in Quebec and at Innove, we are very open for such collaboration. We've done more and more with Horizon Europe, which Canada is now part of for the pillar 2. It's very interesting to do those kind of collaborative research, and those are clear example of potential success in energy transition projects.
Thank you very much for that, and also for bringing up this concept of social acceptability. I think that that's also one of a very big issue. I would like to open the floor to all of you and also the online floor to for a bit of an open discussion about what we've heard. I mean, we've heard a lot of different things. We've heard about this question of this multi-level question, you know, community, definitely community engagement, but also the role of higher levels of government, and how do we balance this, and what is the right role for each? This question, which I think is a really important question, about going from planning to implementation. How do you all go from planning to implementation? You can have a great plan, but if you don't implement it, you've just been spending a lot of time making a plan. This notion of trust and making, you know, how do you generate this trust? How do you maintain this trust? There are also some questions that we have that we circulated a little bit earlier about how did your region anticipate future energy and climate needs? Is this something that you have been thinking about over time and working towards? And I think the point that Christophe brought up was a very interesting one about the schools and children. And, you know, now there's almost an entire generation that has gone through a program. And how does that change? How does that change how people think? And do we have to think across generations in a question of energy transition? What were some of the trade-offs your regions faced when moving forward in a transition, or as you were thinking about hydrogen transition? What are the trade-offs that you're thinking about having to put into place? Any good practices or tips to mobilize support? What incentives are necessary? And if a region came up to you and said, North Rhine-Westphalia or Lapland or Basque Country, we want to start an energy and climate transition today. What are some recommendations you have for us so that we can move forward? And I put this also to our colleagues on the other side of the Atlantic, in Quebec and in Northern Virginia and in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to leave it to you. For those of you who wish to say something, you can either raise your hand, you can raise your name and try to make it stand up, but I'll turn the floor over to Sabina first. And feel free to ask each other questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you both to the presenters for the presentations. They're very, and also the three comments, really enlightening. It raises a question for me that Commissioner Senjum brought up, which was, remember what he said in his intro comments? It's all about buzz and hum. It's all about people, bringing people along. And I think, you know, one of the things that Christoph Vetter pointed out when he talked about education and the kids in the kindergarten, it's about people. Why? When I first came to Saarbeck, I was surprised by the mayor spending, in my view, an inordinate amount of time interacting with kindergarten kids and school kids. What does this have to do with economic development? And I was so naive and uninformed because I didn't understand what Christoph pointed out, that 10 years from now, these are the people who are making decisions, who are voting, who are putting people in place that make decisions, and who are going to be in decision-making positions. And our challenge, I think, today is we are trying to create a transformation to something that doesn't yet exist. it requires people, engaging people. And in my view, what Saarbeck has demonstrated so well is first come the people. It's a comprehensive approach. And I was wondering, so how did can you say a little bit more about how these projects came about? Because somebody else also said, how do we get from plans to projects? Why are projects important? And what about these 150 different measures? As an outsider, I find that overwhelming. Who wants to have 150 measures? As an economic development person, I don't want to have 150 measures that I need to keep track of. But you somehow did. What's the recipe here?
Yeah. Well, it's always difficult to raise the money for these projects, as you all know. And what we did was to calculate how much would be an investment for a specific project and how much would be the outcome. And we started with the easy projects to gain the money for the difficult projects. Educational projects are always difficult because you raise no money with education. And for that reason, we tried to shift the money from the projects where we gain the money into projects where we lose money, because they are also very important to us. And perhaps the mayor will show some ideas what we did, for example, to get money out of the bioenergy park and to use that money for projects of the community. Perhaps you can say something about that.
Yeah, very recent project. So most of you will see the bioenergy park. This is a former munition depot where there are wind turbines, photovoltaic installations, and solar installations, and biomass power plants. And 3 years ago, there was a company that installed at Saarbeck, and they wanted the green energy, the pure green energy, 100% only from the bioenergy park. And we provided that to them, but we said, okay, this is it's not very expensive, because you don't have to pay the grid fees if you transport it directly from the bioenergy park to the plant. But we said, okay, if you save money for your energy, you will pay for every kilowatt hour, you pay 1 cent for this educational side. And so you see 1 cent per kilowatt hour, that sounds not too much, but the consumption of such a company and other consumers that are also connected to this system, they really raise a remarkable amount of money for the educational side. And so we see with electricity, we can earn money. And so part of it we spend for the education. And so this is how everyone can benefit from these projects. And it's only, as Christoph mentioned, is the idea how to shift the money from where we earn it to where we need it to spend for further development.
Great. Thank you very much. Sounds actually very astute. Francesco.
I give 3 very quick examples on the education that happened in our region. First of all, as the professor said before, the importance of education within the kindergarten is the best example when we look at the father and mothers. Many years ago, we did a project. We went inside the kindergarten to show the kids how relevant it is to switch off the light, showing them how much energy you need to switch on. So we put bicycles, and there was a tricky game to switch on the light. Okay. Then we gave them a very easy toy that was to show at home when daddy and mommy forgot to switch off the light. Okay, and we took the short survey. We are speaking about babies of 3-4 years, but all the parents said that the most, let me say, empowering way was to get somehow taught by their small kids that they needed to switch off the light. This is the first one. The second one is many years ago, I mean, we were launching a new small wind turbines. Small means anyway 24 meters. Okay, yeah, it's small, but I'm speaking about on the coast. And many people was really disturbed by the noise of wind turbines. So we were able to convince the major to install this wind turbine on a harbor. In my city, there is a harbor. And when we installed it for many years, all the schools went to see the wind turbines, to listen and to see that there is no real noise. And this was the advantage of keeping the future generations to look how the small wind turbines do not do any kind of noise. And the third one has been a very big photovoltaic project. I'm speaking about 64 hectares. So it was involved all the community in this small town to show them the advantages to have. And so it was not a real agri-photovoltaics, but anyway, I'm speaking about 15 years ago. And it was a type of photovoltaic where the ships were able to stay below it. And it was more than 500 ships. And in the end, it was created a small community making the cheese out of the sheep. And so honestly, as far as I know, in the north east of Italy, it has been one of the few projects where nobody has ever said nothing or anything against this project. But to make this, we made a project with all these 400 people. We explained them through different workshops how the photovoltaic plant went on. So the communication, in my small experience, is really driving the possibility to be transparent, as we said before. Thank you.
Thank you. That, I think, very much highlights the questions of engagement and communication and showing the value in what's being done. Yeah, Claudia.
Sorry, if I may go on with Francesco's highlights. Yes, these are few very local and beautiful experiences, but then the problem stays. Because you should organize so many dissemination events in where you tell the story about this beautiful project in so many places with so many people. And then again, Francesco told us about future generations, which are maybe the easier ones who talk with. But the problem is the adults, it's us. It's our age and the other aging people, because we also have a problem in aging demography in Europe. So the most difficult people to try to get for getting their trust in clean transition and to helping them in not having green discontent or feeling green colonialism we read about before. Are the adult and much adult people. So that's the problem, and we have to. So it's true that we have to have a local-based approach with many scattered beautiful projects that we have to tell and build together with people those projects. But then in the meantime, we need a national strategy, a national perspective, which has to lead also the regions together, because when you talk about industrial policy and industrial transitions, you need a national perspective. So and you need different paces, as I was saying before. So you need the local ones, the beautiful, the little ones, and we have experience also in the Emilia-Romagna region with renewable energy communities. We're doing really a great job with them. And I have to say that it works because there is a very big trust in us. We have built a community with our renewable energy communities. They ask us, we have a very deep connection with them, and we help them with documents. So we make dissemination, we help companies, we help citizens, municipalities. We're always open to them for giving them advice for this, and it works on the little. But then you also need a fast pace with the big green energy plants, and for that you need good laws, good rules, and straight directions.
Thank you very much. I thank you also for highlighting an issue of scale, that an energy transition, there is work to be done on a small scale and work to be done on a very large scale. And we need to be able to shift between both and also fund both and have an impact on both.
And link both, because people look always at the little one because they can see what is here and now, but cannot see what is up and in the neighborhoods. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to leave our room for a moment and turn online. I know there's an online comment, but I'd also, which Wing will read in a moment. And I'd also like to ask online participants if you have anything you'd like to share. While you think about it, Wing, would you like to share the online comment?
Sure. Just to read out a comment shared by Sebastian Huysen from the University of Twente in the Netherlands, I believe. And he would like to emphasize a point, which is the technical expertise, especially grounded in techno-economies, which means, of course, local interests need to be integrated early on, and social acceptance and political willpower are important, but they need to match with the techno-economic realities. And I think he's using some examples in the Netherlands, perhaps, and they are seeing that this play out now with all the some failing hydrogen for energy, or sometimes for transportation projects at the local and regional level, such as abandoned hydrogen bus fleets, discarded hydrogen train and rail pilots, and there are some discontinued projects for home heating, etc. And all this, I think he's trying to emphasize the need for technical expertise in this transition process as well.
Thank you for the comment. Yes, please.
Yeah, I would like to say something about that. So we had that question in Saarbeck. What would be first if we would like to produce renewable energy? Is it photovoltaics? Is it wind? Is it biomass? How about the geothermal energy? How about all these other energies? Is it burning straw or what is it? And we had a lot of ideas, but we had no money to investigate that in depth. So what we did, we used student works. And during that time, we did more than 30 student works on that, just to find out what would be a good idea to investigate that deeper with, let's say, professional engineers. And that was a really good idea. And we had a close cooperation also with the school, and our students went into the school and showed their work. And afterwards, we had round tables with citizens and discussing all these issues. And so this was a cheap and easy way for us to use that technical expertise on a lower level and to bring it to a higher level, to these points where it was important and where it made sense.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, either online or in the room? Any other? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I think when you're talking about dynamics such as trust or the use of clubs like social dynamics, and Colleen was also talking about, I think we need to talk about the difference for those communities that have the phase out dynamics, right? So certain kinds of energies are being phased out, and what is the correct mix of the policy mix that would help those communities be resilient to that phase out. At the same time, there's phase in. So, I mean, I saw win-win as being one of the things that was brought up, but when we're talking about transatlantic cooperation, I think we should also focus on how do we balance those phase in and phase out dynamics, and what is the correct policy mix? You know, Sebastian talks about technology, but and also social technologies that will help us to think about things not just about acceptance but also resistance. So the colleague from Emilia-Romagna brought that up. And so what are these dynamics? What is situated in the phase out and the phase in, and how can we ensure that the policies benefit all across the value chain? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Well, I would like to maybe go to this balance. You mentioned, Verena, and someone mentioned the balance between the local level or the community level and the large scale. And I think that at the large scale, I think we are missing one important word that also the European Commission has been forgetting for a number of years, and then the Commission is changing the shift, and it's industry. if we need to do the energy transition, we need economic development, we need social welfare, we need to keep competitiveness. I think the big word and the Draghi report is highlighting the competitiveness issue. And so Europe needs steel mills, oil refineries, pulp and paper factories. I mean, maybe that's bad news, but we don't only need action at local level and communities, and it's very important, but the large-scale issue cannot be solved with that kind of approach. We need to keep the competitiveness of highly intensive energy-consuming industries, such as those sectors I mentioned, and then we have also to look for and design those solutions to decarbonize the European industry without hindering, without hitting their competitiveness. That's the issue. And on the other side, we still have to become more competitive in developing the net zero technologies. In fact, one of the most relevant acts that the European Commission has approved in recent times is the Net Zero Industry Act, that for the first time it sets a target of the market share of net zero technologies that Europe should be able to manufacture and provide. Because otherwise we are in the risk of becoming independent, not being dependent on fossil fuels like we have been for many decades, but now we may become dependent on solar panels, batteries, and critical raw materials coming from China. I have to say the word China. So I think it's very relevant to keep both levels. Of course, we have to work in the social acceptance in the community level, but the industrial competitiveness issue has to be addressed, I would say, from at least regional or even member state and now European level to be solved.
You are absolutely right. And I didn't mention it because we were focusing more on the people now, but you are right. The main use of power is done by the industries. And for that reason, it's very important to include them. And we did that in Saarbeck. We have these seven wind turbines over there. And one of them is owned by a cooperative of people from Saarbeck. And one of them is owned by the community itself. And the others are owned by companies, by local companies, which are producing their own power there. And what we also did, we have a cooperation with these companies, bringing, for example, students in these companies doing work about how they could reduce their energy, reduce the water use, reduce the wastewater, and find ways how they could come to a sustainable production. This is also a very important part, and this is what we did also in Saarbeck. Thank you for mentioning it.
Thanks very much. I think I would like to continue this conversation, but we're going to run out of time. So I would then invite everyone now to take a break, take about a 10-minute-ish break, and then we'll come back for our second roundtable, which I'll introduce when we come back. But I would like to thank everyone around the table and the screen for all of your insights and your input and this discussion, because I think it's brought up a whole bunch of very, very interesting and critical points. And I still am going to, I think, come back to this question of scale, because it seems that we have to learn to work at multiple scales. And that's maybe something that we need to learn to do really well. So thank you. Please take a break. There's coffee, there's biscuits, there's chocolate, I believe, and be back. You member state participants. For our QR code or that non-QR code. And we will start the session. I'll introduce the session once everyone has sort of settled down. Okay, the question is to type 1 or 2 keywords about what you would like to learn from your peers and especially from your North American peers about energy and climate transition? Thank you for letting us know that. We will activate it momentarily. Okay, it should be active. So what would you like to learn from your North American peers? And those in North America, you are going to have the same question in a moment about your EU peers. So you might want to start thinking ahead.
Everyone okay with the QR code?
Is it working?
Yep.
Okay.
So, okay. EU.
Yeah, EU. Mr. Sentence, just for the EU, and we will hold one for North America in a moment. So.
It's okay.
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 Okay, now this QR code and number is for those of you who either are in or live in North America. Oops. Okay, so hang on, we're going to activate this one too.
Maybe I can't activate both.
Okay, we'll show you the European code in a moment. Okay, this is the European code. Are we good with the European code? Okay, now this is going to be the next one. This is the North American code. Is it active?
Both are active.
Okay, both are active. And then what are we going to do? So the question is, what would you like to learn from your peers in the other side, on the other side of the Atlantic? Is everyone sort of ready to see what everyone else wants to learn? Okay, why don't, while everybody finishes, I'll just introduce this roundtable because I jumped right into it. This roundtable is about transatlantic partnerships for energy and climate transition. And what we really want to emphasize in this discussion is learning. Because despite geographic differences and distances, I think there's something that we can all learn from each other to accelerate energy and climate transition. And we'd like to explore different tools and partnerships and examine their transferability. So let's take a look at the results of the Slido. EU first. This is what EU member states said that they would like to learn from North American counterparts. So biggest challenges regarding citizen participation, funding strategies, motivating SMEs, big. Big is in the middle, and I'm very curious about big, so I would like to, yes, please.
I think we had a problem because I insert a whole sentence. It's all cut into pieces. I think others have the same problem. That's why big is so often mentioned.
So this became a word cloud. Big projects, methods, policies, large scale. I don't know what happened, but we will come back to this. Do you have any insights, Wing? Okay, let's move to North America and see if we had the same problem. Yes, we did. Transition, energy, and national. Okay, so maybe why do you plan so much when you likely know what needs to be done? That came out in one long fell swoop. Maybe what we can do is just to pick this up, I'll randomly select a couple of participants online and here, and you can read out your sentences. Will that work? Okay. So maybe if North Rhine-Westphalia has a sentence they would like to share, or Münster, but why doesn't, as the host, yes, please.
I'd like to learn more about the just do it mentality of the United States.
So the just do it mentality, that's a very good question. And Slovenia, what would you like to learn from North America?
Yeah, we heard about that they are very advanced on the hydrogen economy field, so we would like to learn more about that, especially in the industrial sector, as Zasavje, former core region in Slovenia, where we are from, is also a industrial region, and we would like to preserve industry in our region and build it, transfer it to competitive, more competitive than it already is.
Good, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to North America for a moment. And I'd like to, sorry, you're all on a screen kind of far away. I don't have my glasses. Dale, what would you like to learn from a European counterpart?
I would love to learn about this process of institutionalizing formal, strategic, purposeful cross-national engagement. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a moment. But for me, that's probably the most important thing, is how you guys prioritize your work internationally so that you're able to allocate staff and resources and budget to engage. And then the measures of success that you use to justify that expenditure of staff time, of budgets, because the how of how we work internationally is just so fundamental now more than ever. The old model, in my opinion, of sister cities just doesn't work. And we need to learn not just about the technologies and the policies of how they work in places like Esslingen, which are amazing and got great stories to share about that, but a whole range of other issues that we can adopt.
Great, thank you. So how to prioritize and measures of success. And Eric, how about you?
The question that comes to my mind is that topic of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. So in the rural areas, we're under-resourced. It's very difficult to get, I wouldn't say very difficult, somewhat difficult to get new companies off the ground, to support small businesses. We just don't have a lot of money to do so. So how are these other rural regions that are coming out of coal supporting the creation of new companies?
Great. Okay, I think that we have some thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for being patient with the Slido that became a word cloud and taking a different approach. Some very interesting things about, I think, also quite cultural in terms of the just do it mentality in the US, which Europe tends to be a little bit more risk adverse than the US. But also in the US, how to prioritize and measures of success, which is something that may be particularly emphasized in Europe, especially with European funds. So this question about SMEs, which is very practical, and also the question about hydrogen, which is very practical, and I think that there is a lot of bridging. So I'm going to keep these written down. They're sort of floating around in the middle here, and they're floating around in cyberspace, crossing the Atlantic. And what I'd like to do is we're going to do something similar as we did in the last roundtable, which is hear from both a region that is participating in this project and also someone outside of the project. So we'll start with Northern Virginia and Dale Medjaris, who's the Senior Regional Planner for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, to briefly share Northern Virginia's experience, especially key lessons learned in building and maintaining partnerships for climate initiatives. And then we will move on to Charles Piccini, who is also online. So let me start, Dale, by giving you the floor, and you've got about 5-ish minutes.
Great. Do you want me to share my slides?
Please.
Great, I'll do that. First, I just want to say thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this project, in particular because we get the chance to share our work, to learn, but most of all, we get the privilege of working with our dear friends in Stuttgart, Thomas Kiewit and Simone Jung, who are just phenomenal. And they have probably the best story to share in the country. I want to get to a point that Peter Berkowitz raised earlier, which is
Dale,
yeah.
Excuse me, can you just put that in presenter mode or in a full screen
Oh yeah,
mode?
I can. Sorry.
Thank you.
There we go. Great. Peter Berkowitz talked about how we bring the transatlantic perspective to regional redevelopment, and Maria, you added, what do we get out of the transatlantic conversation? I think that's really, really vital. So what I'd like to do in the next 4 minutes is share with you the story of our collaboration over 27 years and how it's evolved and where it, I think, can go in the context of this really, really wonderful project. So I'll just really summarize for those of you not familiar with me, our region that we represent. We're 13 counties, cities, and towns of Northern Virginia. We're the suburbs opposite Washington, D.C. We're a government agency. Our board is comprised of the local elected officials of those 13 local governments, the mayors, the county supervisors, the city council members. We're about 2.6 million people spread out over about 1,200 square kilometers, $302 billion economy. If we're an independent country, it'd be the 48th largest in the world. And the image that you see delineates not just the geographic boundaries, but is our first attempt at mapping what is probably one of the most important transatlantic economic, environmental issues of our lifetimes, which is the high concentration of data centers and their proximity to public institutions. Northern Virginia has approximately 200, at the last count, 70 data centers with 110 planned. It is the largest data center concentration by far in the world. The energy consumption that will be needed to power our data centers, particularly with the inclusion of AI, is expected to double in the next 10 years. I've seen some studies suggest it could be within the next 5. So that gives you a sense of the energy and the climate perspective, in particular also because our local governments have commitments to be climate neutral by 2050, and that's really, really important. Switching to just a very quick economic talking points, we are in our own industrial transition. We have had approximately 170,000 federal jobs. We're losing a lot because of the new policies of the federal government. For every federal worker, there are approximately 2 contractors, so you can imagine what this downsizing means for us. On the other hand, data centers alone provide, in terms of tax support for Loudoun County, which is the uppermost of our local governments, approximately $800 to $1 billion a year. So balancing this transition of over-reliance on federal jobs to the digital economy is going to be a very, very interesting process. I want to call to everyone's attention the ways in which we've worked with regions like Stuttgart over the past 27 years, with hopes that it might inspire equivalent discussions or processes leading to more strategic, again, purposeful, outcome-oriented exchanges. To overcome the stigma of global engagement, and there is a stigma in the United States of working internationally, there is, in my estimation, a need to focus on benefits to Main Street. And that's best done when we, as local staff, can demonstrate some kind of environmental, social, or economic outcome to our local governments. So the best way of doing it is if there's an innovation that works really well in cities like Esslingen or Stuttgart or Hamburg or Düsseldorf or the Ruhr or in the Netherlands, we will do our best to find it and apply it. Second, we prioritize the countries with which we work based on not only the innovations that we could learn technically or from a policy perspective, but since a core component of economic redevelopment, this has been raised in numerous webinars that we've held together. The luring of foreign direct investment is the second filter that we use to determine with whom we work. And then finally, and I'll touch more on this at the close, the last slide of my presentation, it's important for economic, environmental, science, research, civil society, institutional collaboration with equivalents across the pond, particularly in regions like Stuttgart. So when we talk about data centers and this important asset, the reason that we focus so closely with regions like Stuttgart in Germany is that in this particular case, Germany has a lot of them too. When the question comes, why in particular? Well, the more demand for electricity to feed data centers, the more stresses that it's going to place on the grid, on energy supply, among other things. We feel that the inclusion or the study of district energy systems, heat recapture could be a way of sort of mitigating that. But again, this particular graph is important because it hopefully mitigates the cynic's argument, why work at all internationally? And there is the answer, or part of it. And then finally, my hope or my expectation is that over the course of this project, we can invite more American cities of size and regions to replicate what we did when we copied what LA did 4 years ago, which was mapping the effects of foreign direct investment within the boundaries of local government, not at the state, not at the regional level, but within the boundaries of local governments like Fairfax County. And that's important because two of our local governments actually have representation in Germany. And it's important to convey the effect of this investment within the boundaries of our local governments so that there's an appreciation for what we do internationally, coupling again policy and technical innovation transfer with economic development. And so over the course of mapping out foreign direct investment within the boundaries of our local government, what you'll see is we not only identified and ranked the countries and the dollar flows, but then the job creation by sector. And it's almost overwhelmingly in the STEM sector. They're high paid, high wage positions. Over the course of the report, which I'll send later, we found that Nestle, for instance, which is a Swiss company, and their equivalent Mars just down the road in McLean pays on average 10-15% wages higher. It's just a very, very beneficial relationship. I have other statistics I could share with you, but I won't, about the power of the transatlantic digital economy. It's twice the size of anything else in the world. So the timing of this conversation, the timing of this kind of engagement is so important for us, I think nationally, internationally, but also for us regionally. I just want to close by highlighting one particular story of what we're doing right now to learn from regions like Stuttgart. For years, we've studied their comprehensive energy systems, their integrated planning, particularly the conveyance of waste heat. In particular, we see now this huge opportunity to convey waste heat by borrowing from some of the policies that have evolved in some of the data center capitals of Germany. I know Stuttgart's not one, but they have set the stage for us in terms of learning in sort of conventional district energy systems. It's estimated that 40% of all energy for data centers is used for cooling. So theoretically, that's a vast amount of energy that could be conveyed and not incur a cost to be vented into the atmosphere. Second, the pushback against data centers in the United States, and in particular Northern Virginia, rests very, very often on complaints about the aesthetics and complaints about the noise. And so by deploying district energy system, you not only promote energy efficiency and recycling of energy, you promote a higher level of aesthetics. You also mitigate the noise by removing all the technical equipment at the top. There's just win-win situations. This particular data center in Frankfurt is relevant too because Equinix launched a European program on heat export. Equinix was the very, very first data center to open in Northern Virginia in 1998, if I'm not mistaken. And what's interesting about this picture is the green wall that they've put up, again, inviting more mixed-use developments around the data center. I'm not saying it's easy or that there's a one-size-fits-all, but the practical applications of these green walls to mitigate the heat, to invite more density, to invite the data center into the community is a step forward. And then finally, the building to the left.
Fail. We lost you. He froze. Okay. But in the meantime, just in the interest of time, can you send him a message that we're going to, okay. Let's move to our next discussant, who is Charles Pizzini, who is manager of transforming industrial ecosystems at the Center for Energy and Materials at the World Economic Forum. And he's joining us to share some concrete lessons in setting up clusters in driving energy transition, and in particular, lessons that can be learned and adopted by regions regardless of whether or not they're in the EU or North America. Charles, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Let me just share my screen. I have 3 slides that I'd like to show you while I go through the initiative and the work. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. All you need to do, yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, the work that you're doing with industrial regions in the US and in Europe resonates a lot with what we're doing. So it's very interesting to see this progressing. So through the World Economic Forum Transitioning Industrial Cluster Initiative, we spent the last 4 years working with industrial regions around the world to try and align industry, government, and investors around shared transition pathways. And the goal is really to try and reduce risk, strengthen coordination, and unlock large-scale investment in digital, low-carbon, and competitive industrial system. What's very interesting is that we're taking the lens of industrial clusters, which sits at the heart of regional economies. They generate millions of jobs, they anchor supply chain and drive prosperity, but at the same time, they concentrate some of the most energy and resource intensive activities. What we believe and what's interesting is that with the right framework, those clusters can become real powerful tools to scale the transition that we need and the system transition that we need. So what we've done, which I think is a little bit similar to what you're trying to do, is that we've launched an initiative with 4 industrial clusters initially. 2 from the UK, so the HyNet industrial cluster, the Humber cluster, the Kwinana cluster in Australia, and the Net Zero Basque Industrial Supercluster, which I think is also part of this OECD initiative in Spain. That was 4 years ago. 4 years later, the initiative has grown to 40 clusters around the world, 13 in Europe, if you also take into account the UK, and 5 in the United States. The size, to give you an idea of those 40 clusters, it's 4.6 million jobs, $508 billion in GDP contribution, and 877 million tons of CO2 emission. So the potential is huge. Cluster in itself is not something new, but what's very interesting is the challenges that they often face. What we've seen is that the governance structure of clusters is often fragmented. Their development strategies also sometimes diverge among the members of those clusters. The infrastructure planning is still, in many cases, siloed, and the demand signals that are necessary to scale a number of the technologies that are needed are still very much fragmented. So this is where there's a real opportunity. And I'm going to try and share some of the lessons learned from 4 years of work with those industry clusters. And I'm going to try to break it down into 3 kind of level. The first step, and I think this is really the most important one before technology, before financing, is governance. Some of the most successful industrial clusters around the world have been able to clearly designate a cluster administrator with clear role and responsibility. And this administrator has been able to put forward a transition roadmap, which is backed by clear key performance indicator. So if you have a vision and you have data at the cluster level and you're able to forecast those data, you're already in a very, very strong place compared to other places and cluster. Interesting cluster administrators are Port Authority, for example. We're seeing in Europe some of the best performing clusters using their Port Authority as the facilitator or the cluster administrator. We also have regional development agency or private companies in certain cases. If we move on, the second important lesson is shared infrastructure. We need to start thinking of this transition at a system level and move away from project by project approach to try and look a little bit more at the infrastructure that is shared at a cluster, at a regional level. CO2 transport network, hydrogen pipelines, grid, port facilities. Because if we start having a common approach to those infrastructure, we will allow multiple companies to plug in, we will scale things faster, and we will be able to coordinate all that scaling. So the shared infrastructure element is very interesting. The third element that I wanted to share with you is the financing. Today, when it comes to being able to secure financing and projects that are securing financing, they are able to align 3 elements, which is long-term offtake, shared infrastructure, I've mentioned it, and then is the phasing of public financing and making sure you allocate different risk to different financing mechanism. And I think this is where the public sector and governments can play a strategic role. You need to simplify grants at the beginning to help scale innovative projects. Then you can move to types of guarantee or concessional debt instrument during the construction. And then you need to allocate certain risk during the operation phase to be able to build those large projects. And we're seeing very interesting types of financing, for example, in Northern Europe to scale CCS projects that can be replicated at the cluster level. And finally, the last part is really on the cluster connection, the third box that you see. Industrial clusters cannot remain isolated. And so there is a need to build this network of cluster, aligning standard, sharing infrastructure, and making sure there are interoperability that's being built. Coordinating demand signal also between clusters. I think we've seen a very interesting project in Andalusia, for example, reaching final investment decision, which is a strong case for European coordination, where the hydrogen, for example, is produced in Spain, but would be transported to the Netherlands and the port of Rotterdam. So I think this idea of network, also transatlantic network, is very important. So to finish, I'm just going to summarize 8 points to launch the discussion that are strategic, I think, at a cluster level. You need credible champions, whether it's on the public or the private side, but you need people and companies that are ready to speak at the cluster level and not as a single entity. You need to have the cluster administrator that has a role and that is identified. You need a roadmap on your goals and backed by KPIs. Something about shared infrastructure that needs to be put in advance and not after the projects. Aggregating demand and offtakes, engaging financier early. The sequencing of public instruments is also very interesting. And then the international regional networks. So that's it for me in, I hope, 5 minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions or discuss if needed.
Thank you very, very much, Charles. That was very interesting and creates also a nice series of points to discuss as well as a framework to think about. I would like to open the floor for discussion. I would like to invite Tim Christie, who is online, as I know he had some things he wanted to share with us. He's the Director of Energy Markets at the Ontario Lower Power Generation Facility in Canada. So, Tim, would you like to say a few words and start our discussion?
Sure, I can give a brief overview of Ontario and talk about some of the energy transition issues that we are grappling with here in Ontario. So just by way of background, Ontario Power Generation is a major power generator in Ontario. We have about 18,000 megawatts of generation in service. We have 11,000 employees at 75 stations across the province. Two focuses for us. One is nuclear power. We have two large nuclear stations totaling about 5,000 megawatts, and we are investing heavily in those stations. One of them is almost completed its refurbishment, which will keep it around for another 30 plus years, and the other one likely to start refurbishment in the next couple of years. And our other focus is hydroelectric generation. We have a lot of legacy hydroelectric generation, nearly 8,000 megawatts in service. But beyond that, we do have experience. We own and operate solar sites. We have some gas sites, and we used to run coal facilities. We've shut them all down. One of them has been converted to biomass, but that was the biggest climate initiative undertaken in Ontario, cutting about 30 megatons of generation. But in terms of the economy of Ontario, we are a very industrial economy. Some key industries: mining, steel, pulp and paper, chemical, and auto manufacturing. And that's where we're starting to see a lot of the energy transition come. Industries are facing a lot of pressure from customers, from their investors, and also through policy frameworks on carbon pricing to reduce their emissions. And so we see this bear out. We have two steel mills, large steel mills in Ontario, both looking at converting from blast furnaces, coal-based blast furnaces, to electric arc furnaces. And so that puts a lot of strain on our electricity generation. We're looking at demand increasing by about 65% by 2050. So how do we address that? Looking at new nuclear. I mentioned refurbishing our existing nuclear units, potentially some more hydroelectric generation, but we will need a lot of new resources to satisfy that need. So a couple of things we're keen to get some experience from Europe on. One is about projects of national interest, and how we expedite those projects, how we get things permitted in time, and how we align those with climate priorities. In Ontario, we also have a duty to consult Indigenous peoples. So all of that can generate some pretty lengthy lead times on projects. So we were looking at ways to expedite those. Another one is around how do we plan for electricity system capacity in a system where we have limited capacity, both generation and transmission. How do we allocate that to projects that we think bring the best benefit, both economically and for climate reasons? And I know the earlier speaker was speaking about data centers in Virginia. We don't have that level of data center penetration, but they are coming, and they can move really quickly and chew up transmission capacity that we would otherwise allocate to other uses. And I think maybe the final point is on carbon leakage. We are an industrial province, but we're surrounded by other industrial states mainly that compete with us, and often do not have carbon pricing policies in place. So how do we adjust for that? How do we implement border carbon policies that ensure that we remain competitive? So that's my very brief overview of Ontario.
Great. Thank you very much. Dale, since you dropped off and you're back, in one sentence, would you like to wrap up?
Yeah, just the last slide was a picture of George Mason University, which is part of this cross-national applied research and science program that involves the University of Stuttgart. We're hoping that we can get a faculty member to come who's an expert in heat export and data centers to do research at NVRC. It will also involve a mapping activity. We're interested in learning from the German experience of heat mapping at the local level. Again, Stuttgart set the trend. We learned a lot from them on their solar mapping and incorporated it. And just final point was that this stuff works. Just on the governor's desk, who, by the way, my understanding is that she's fluent in French, our new governor, and spent 6 months in Berlin doing graduate work. But there's two pieces of legislation which are expected to pass, which are informed exactly by this kind of work. The first is unplug-in solar, balcony solar, as it's referred to in Europe. Our legislation will be modeled after that, which was done in Utah, which was modeled after what they did in Germany. And then the final legislation will be calls for deeper research into heat conveyance and district energy connecting data centers. And thank you so much. Sorry for the technical glitch, but
That's okay. It happens. Thank you, Dale, very much. I would like to open the floor now to anyone who has anything they would like to share, any questions for North American participants, any questions from North American participants to European participants. We have talked about a whole bunch of things, ranging from, the importance of governance to, what Dale was talking about, the benefits to Main Street, really demonstrating the economic, social, or environmental outcomes of a transition. We talked about the importance of these international partnerships. So Christoph, please, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, I have one question to North Virginia. I was astonished to hear that you have 270 of these data centers, and I would be interested in how are they fired? What are you using to produce electricity? And is there any use of the heat which is also produced?
Not at the moment. The last point, and this is what we want to learn from you, because if 40% of the energy is used for cooling and there's now expenditures financially made into dispensing that waste heat into the atmosphere, we see opportunities for creating circular systems based again on what you are now obliged to do across Europe, where Germany set the standard. And so in terms of our electricity mix, we have about 25% comes from nuclear. And the trend in, I think, 6%, 7% renewables, solar, wind, the rest is all gas. And so the trend that we see, that we're observing is this moment. By the way, Virginia imports about, I think it's close to 35% of all its electricity comes from out of states, like places such as Pennsylvania and Indiana. And so the trend is for on-site behind the meter gas-powered systems. We're seeing an explosion of that. We're hoping that we can start encouraging battery storage connected to distributed energy to promote solar. I've got a great slide deck from the state that I could put in the chat box or share with Maria and her team about all of these trends. We just got it about 2 days ago. Just one point, Tim made a really interesting point about permitting, because this came up. It doesn't affect our region, but it affects Virginia as a whole, which is now it's been approved the largest offshore wind farm in the country. And there's a recognition that as the data center explosion takes place across the state, there's going to be a need for lots and lots of electrons. And so under all the above energy strategy, we suspect wind will have no choice but to come back. And so the permitting process is going to be really important, because that you have more experience in Europe with this. And I would suggest this would be something fun to look at, is how we can learn from your regulatory experiences with permitting and apply it to what will hopefully be a renewal of wind sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I love the concept of wanting to learn from Europe about regulatory issues.
It's come up a lot. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, and it comes up in Europe a lot too. Yes.
We have in Finland, Lapland, we have some examples of the heat transition in Lapland from when the transition is from peat and wood to this data center heating system, and also wastewater heat. Cannot tell a lot more about it, but we do have those examples and also new ones, and some regulatory issues about what comes to taxes and changes lately.
Anyone else?
About the waste heat from data centers, we're trying to study this because we would like to apply it also in Emilia-Romagna, because we have several ones and we are deploying new ones, and in Lombardy, also in northern Italy. Right now we have a request for 80 gigawatts of data centers in all Italy, and just 40, 50 in the northern Italy. And so it's really a huge amount of electricity that they would ask to the grid. And so the problem is how to use this waste heat. And what I would like to ask maybe to the German colleagues, how do they plan? How do they balance the economic plan looking at the future of these data centers? So how long these data centers will stay there? How much will they develop power for calculation, and so energy consumption for electricity and energy production for waste heat? So how do you balance all those elements together to be sure that's worth building a district heating system for using all that waste heat? Thank you.
Does anyone from Germany want to respond?
So probably this applies for all European countries, because I think it's a European legislation. So there is an increasing level of heat that is produced by the data center that needs to be reused. It starts with 10%, 15%, 20%. This is European, I think it's European legislation. And so this means that the heat will become part of the business case of the data center. And so the data center needs, this is the part of the revenues, the heat. The heat is quite cheap because it's wasted heat, reused. And so that gives for those who run the heating grid, it gives the security that there will be a very constant source of heat. And this is very favorable for the heating grid, because it's a very, very cheap source of heat. Costs really nothing. And so this is really a kind of win-win situation for both. But there's a need that for the data center operators, there is this legal requirement that they are obliged to reuse the heat. So we see that for communities, for municipalities, it was very attractive to have a data center in their activity zones, and to reuse the heat, because there's no cheaper heat source of heat as the waste heat from data center or others. Yeah.
We have some space available in Saarbeck for a data center.
So I would know if someone's interesting. And we would like to give a showcase that a very high amount of heat can be reused. Yeah. So no, it's really, we were planning a heating central for heating grid, and we say, okay, probably now we will produce it probably by biomass, but we say in addition we can add waste heat from a data center at any time. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, not anymore to these data centers or the waste heat, but I think there was one question for the European regions, that why don't you just do it because you seem to know what to do. So related to that, I think there are at least of course several reasons, but I think one reason why we are planning, and we have we have many ready-made plans, is that there is a financial capacity is low for implementation, but we do get financing for planning those renewable energy projects, for example, from European funds, but they don't cover the investments as such. And they are, of course, then the second part is the time frame for the investments, that they take so long time, even though when the plan is ready. So we can see it also in Finland and in Lapland that it takes like 10 to 15 years before this kind of an energy station or a power plant is built. The permitting process is really time consuming and difficult, and all the parts that belong to that process, so they take a long time. And that also the time frame is really difficult also when thinking about the skills development, because it's really difficult to make the educational programs and so, because if there is a plan to have a new kind of technologies and so, and then the education institutes start planning educational programs. So it might be, of course, that it's like 10 years before it is implemented. So then there are a lot of this kind of challenges. And then, of course, also in the sparsely populated region, as for example, Lapland, where we have less than 2 persons per square kilometer. So the population is so sparsely located to our region that it's really difficult also to get the workforce for these investments, even though when they are permitted and ready to be built. So I think the challenges, we don't lack the challenges for implementing our good ideas.
Thank you. I'm going to move towards wrapping us up in a moment. Wing, I know that Dr. Joly had I don't know if he's still with us, but he had a response or a comment to make that we'll share with the group.
Yeah, so I will perhaps just share on behalf of Dr. Joly. It's a point related to the previous discussion when we talk about failed projects, but I think it's also a valid point since we have talked a lot about new technologies in this energy and climate transition. So Dr. Joly's point is about creating new market segments and user bases for these new technologies, such as hydrogen, but also all this technology we talk about around data center, because a crucial problem is that new technologies are dependent on very limited market segments, and if there's not a strong user base to support them. So the need is also for regional governments to be proactive and create enabling conditions for multiple market segments through public procurement and or other policy instrument. I think this is also probably something that regions among themselves can exchange of how to create such a user base for all this technology. So I'm putting out these thoughts from Dr. Joly on the table.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Joly for that additional piece of information and that thought. Thank you very much. Okay, to wrap up, I'd like to come back to 2 questions that came up earlier in what North Americans would like to learn from Europeans and Europeans from North Americans. And I'm sorry, Dale, about the regulations, but we really find Europe to be very regulated and difficult. For the Europeans, a question, I'm sorry. Yes, for the Europeans, to respond to Eric's question about SMEs and I believe, Eric, it was SMEs and sort of an incentive for them to adopt innovation and technology. Is that roughly what it was? Okay. Would one, maybe 2 of you like to share 1 word of advice or 2 for Eric on motivating SMEs to adopt innovation and technology? Yeah, Francesco.
Yeah, one tool that the European Commission is working on quite heavily, it's called the innovative public procurement. So it's a possibility for the SMEs that are developing technologies to let me say, test this technology through a public procurement, so to give this kind of tool. And this side, obviously, it's quite not so impossible to implement on the administrative point of view, from what I know, but this kind of innovative public procurement obviously requires technology to be quite advanced. So I don't know if you were referring to the fact of already, let me say, market-ready technologies or under development, but in Europe, in the last 1-2 years, there is an increasing interest from the European Commission to create groups between member states to evaluate how to implement innovative public procurement, for example.
Thank you. Yes, Lucina.
Yes, hello. From our experience, the best way to incentivize technology and innovation in SMEs is the requirements of their clients, driving companies that have a tractor effect in their value chains. So this is the reason why we have been working during many times trying to promote collaborative projects between these driving companies in our region together with SMEs. Because again, in our experience from the public administration, we cannot buy everything. In fact, we can buy little things. We don't have public procurement. In my opinion, it doesn't serve for everything that companies are producing. So we have to incentivize that these driving companies act as real driving companies in each of the territories.
Thank you. Yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, maybe one more answer. I worked, before I worked for the government, I worked in research in the area of entrepreneurship. And then one thing we always learned in that field is that it's very much a people-driven business. And that is very often that you need to have one person who drives the innovation in the SME. So you need to identify that person and have a promoter, a driver, and focus on that person, getting support from the management as well, and pushing innovations through. So I think if you just have a general goal without identifying that one specific person, it's really hard to implement. I hope that helps a little bit. That was always something that came up in research on that topic.
Thank you. And so I hope that that also helps our North American counterparts from the European perspective on SMEs. And now I would like to ask the North Americans your insights, or one or two of you, just raise your hand or speak up, for the just do it mentality. And what is it, cultural? Is it the way the system is set up? What is it? Because I think it's important. Dale.
Yeah, so I can speak as a child of a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and the son of a German mother. And that is that the relatives would always come and ask my dad about what was going on and why Americans took this, caution to the wind approach. And then they'd see my mother talk about how sad it was that we had to go on school buses, how we had a regulated highway system, there's no Autobahn. In other words, this issue of risk aversion, I think is very, you have to be cautious, because the Harvard Business School did a couple of papers about the incremental processes and development of SMEs. The Mittelstand of Germany, I think, is a wonderful example, and particularly in Stuttgart, of how this very systemic approach is great. I'm not denying that there's a risk-averse culture. I'm just saying, be careful of over stereotyping when it comes to letting, because it works both ways. And I think that needs to be appreciated. I just sent you a nice article, appeared a couple of years ago, research George Mason University on SME development in Germany. And I can dig up and send the one on Harvard Business School as well. But just, we have to be sensitive to cultural stereotyping.
Okay, thank you. We will share those articles that Dale just mentioned with the group. Are we good? Anyone else want to say anything, or else I'm going to close out the seminar for the day? Yes, please.
I actually put that on the screen. No one ever said
societal change had to be organized. It usually isn't. Change is chaotic. And as you just think about that a little bit, to imagine planning an energy transformation for a state of Minnesota or for the United States or for Germany and putting it into a document like this, it's near impossible. Change happens for a million different ideas by a million different people, and it just it's not fathomable to me, at least, to think that you can ever be so precise as to write a plan for change, especially at this magnitude.
Yes, please.
And let me add a little bit. Also, I just tying into Ms. Ekdahl's comments, I think we have fewer challenges to the implementation of good ideas in the United States. So, and from a business perspective, and that's why we have a strong startup culture, because there are fewer hurdles to climb. And, you know, from a business perspective, that's a great thing. If you then let business people run government, it can be disastrous. So, and it comes from the educational system already. And I came to the United States as a young woman, always thinking, you know, when I ran into issues, oh, what's wrong with me? And then I, you know, after law school, I started representing companies that come for market entry into the United States. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with them? Because I didn't understand the legal system until they sent me back to Germany. And I served for 18 years as honorary consul in Florida. So that's when, you know, when the government and then Americans consider Europe murky, like, oh, we don't know what's going on. It's completely overregulated. And, you know, and so the can-do attitude is because there's fewer restraints, legal restraints, I think, for people. And that, of course, comes from the culture as well.
Thank you. And that's a very good point. And it ties in very nicely with the last comment that was written by Thierry Saint-Cyr, and who says that Quebec strikes a balance between the just do it and the let's plan it mentalities. And we're often culturally halfway between the US and Europe. So thank you very much. With that kind of positive equilibrium note, I would like to thank all of you for your participation, to thank our North American counterparts and colleagues for being with us, to thank our discussants, and everyone in the room for the dialogue and the exchange. I hope this brought some interesting points and some lessons and some other things to think about. And I will say good evening, or actually good afternoon to everyone there, and good evening to everyone here. And we'll get into some logistics for the evening in a moment. Thank you very much to all of our North American participants. Bye-bye.